The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. A crowd of people stood around a wooden chessboard in the middle of the village square. The air was thick with excitement and whispers. At one side of the board sat Lila, a simple woman with worn-out clothes and a shy smile. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but her eyes sparkled with something no one could quite understand. Across from her sat Victor, the town's chess champion, with a smug grin plastered on his face. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, certain he'd win before the game even started. The crowd snickered, waiting for Lila to make a fool of herself. They had challenged her to this game, to mock her, to prove she was nothing more than a quiet nobody. But then, Lila reached out, her fingers steady, and moved her first chess piece of Ponto, the center of the board. The crowd gasped. Victor's grin vanished. His eyes widened, as if he'd seen a ghost. That single move wasn't just bold, it was impossible. It was a move only a master would make, a move that turned the game upside down before it even began. The whispers stopped. Every eye locked on Lila, who sat calmly, as if she hadn't just shaken the world. What had she done? How could a simple woman know that move? Lila wasn't always the talk of the village. Just that morning, she was sweeping her small porch, humming a tune, her brown hair tied back with a frayed ribbon. She lived in a tiny house at the edge of Willowbrook, a place where everyone knew everyone. Lila kept to herself, selling vegetables from her garden and mending clothes to earn a living. People called her simple because she didn't talk much, didn't boast, and never joined the loud gatherings at the town hall. To them, she was invisible, someone to ignore or tease. Victor, on the other hand, was the opposite. Tall, loud, and proud. He was the best chess player in Willowbrook. He'd beaten everyone who dared challenge him, from kids to old men. He loved the attention, the cheers, and the way people looked at him like he was unbeatable. That morning, he and his friends were bored, looking for fun. They spotted Lila carrying a basket of carrots through the square. One of Victor's friends, Tom, laughed and pointed. "Hey, Victor, bet you could beat her at chess blindfolded." The group roared with laughter. Lila, hearing them, paused but didn't turn. Victor smirked. "Why not? Let's make it a show. Hey, Lila, want to play a game?" Lila looked up, her face calm but her heart racing. She didn't like crowds or attention, but something in Victor's voice, the way it dripped, with mockery made her stomach twist. She knew they wanted to laugh at her, to make her feel small. "Okay," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd burst into giggles, thinking she'd agreed to her own humiliation. They set up a table in the square, dragged out a chessboard, and called everyone to watch. "Lila's gonna cry by the third move," Tom shouted, and the crowd laughed louder. But Lila wasn't thinking about their laughter. As she sat down, she glanced at the chessboard, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. She'd seen a board like this before, long ago, in a place no one in Willowbrook knew about. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a memory she'd buried deep. Victor, still grinning, leaned forward. "Your move, Lila," he said, his voice mocking. The crowd leaned in, ready to laugh. Lila's hand hovered over the pieces, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. She picked up the pawn, moved it to the center, and set it down with a soft click. The crowd froze. Victor's face changed, his confidence cracked like glass. That move, it was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of move that could trap a king in 10 moves. How did she know it? The square buzzed with whispers. "Did you see that? No way she meant to do that." Victor stared at the board, his hands gripping the table. He looked up at Lila, who met his gaze with calm, steady eyes. For the first time, he felt a chill. Who was this woman? The crowd pressed closer, their laughter gone, replaced by confusion and curiosity. Lila said nothing, but her heart pounded. She wasn't here to lose. Not today. Not ever again. The village square was alive with tension, like a storm about to break. The crowd pressed closer to the chessboard, their eyes darting between Lila and Victor. That single pawn, move bold, precise, dangerous, had silenced their laughter. Victor's face was pale, his confident grin replaced by a tight frown. He leaned over the board, studying it like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Lila sat still, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm as a pond on a windless day, but inside her heart was racing. She hadn't touched a chessboard in years, not since that day, the one she tried so hard to forget. The crowd whispered, their voices buzzing like bees. Was it luck? She can't know chess. Victor's going to crush her now. But Victor wasn't so sure anymore. He moved a knight, his hand shaking slightly, and looked up at Lila, waiting for her next move. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced over the board, moving another pawn with a soft click. The crowd gasped again. It was another perfect move, one that boxed Victor's knight into a corner. His eyes widened. The game had barely started, and he was already losing control. How was this possible? The square erupted in murmurs, but Lila's gaze stayed locked on the board, her mind racing back to a time she'd hidden from everyone. Days before the chess match, Lila's life was quiet, almost invisible. She woke early each morning, tending her garden under the soft light of dawn. Her small house was filled with the smell of earth and herbs, and she liked it that way. The villagers didn't know much about her, and she preferred it. But they didn't know about the old wooden box under her bed either. Inside, it was a chessboard, worn and scratched, with pieces that hadn't been touched in years. Lila avoided that box like it was a ghost. Every time she saw it, her chest tightened and memories flooded. Back memories of a different place, a different life. Long ago, before Willowbrook, Lila lived in a bustling city far away. She was just a girl then, barely 10, living with her grandfather in a tiny apartment above a noisy market. Her grandfather was a quiet man, but his eyes lit up when he played chess. He taught Lila every night, setting up the board on their rickety table. Chess is like life, he'd say, his voice warm. It's not about the pieces you have, it's about how you use them. Lila was a natural. By 12, she was beating grown men in the market, her small hands moving pieces with speed and cunning. The men laughed at first, just like Victor's friends, but they stopped laughing when she won. She became a local legend, the girl who could outsmart anyone. But then, something happened. Something terrible. Lila never spoke of it. But it was why she left the city, why she hid in Willowbrook, why she buried that chessboard and swore never to play again. Back in the square, Victor was sweating. He moved a bishop, trying to take back control, but Lila's next move, a quiet, deadly knight, made his jaw drop. The crowd was no longer mocking her. They were confused, some even scared. Who is she? A woman whispered. Tom, Victor's friend, pushed through the crowd, his face red. She's cheating! No way she knows these moves! He shouted. The accusation hung in the air, and all eyes turned to Lila. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up at Tom, her voice soft but firm. I'm not cheating. I'm just playing. The crowd went silent. Victor stared at her, his confidence crumbling. He'd wanted to humiliate her, but now he was the one feeling small. He made another move, his hand trembling. Lila's eyes flicked to the board, and a faint smile touched her lips. She reached for a piece, her fingers steady, and the crowd held its breath. What she did next would change everything. The village square was a cauldron of whispers and wide eyes. The chessboard, once just a stage for Victor's victory, now felt like a battlefield where something impossible was unfolding. Lila's fingers hovered over a bishop, her face as calm as ever, but her eyes burned with a quiet fire. The crowd leaned in, holding their breath as she slid the bishop across the board with a soft click. Victor's face went white. That movement wasn't just good, it was devastating. In one stroke, Lila had trapped his queen, leaving him with no good options. The crowd gasped, some clapping hands over their mouths. Tom, Victor's loud friend, shouted, "No way! She's gotta be cheating!" But the accusation sounded weak now, almost desperate. Lila didn't even look at him. She kept her eyes on the board, waiting for Victor's move. He stared at the pieces, his hands shaking, sweat beading on his forehead. The smug champion who'd laughed at Lila just minutes ago was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he was staring into a storm. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were hooked, their whispers turning to questions. How does she know this? Who is Lila? The air crackled with suspense, and every heart in the square pounded as Victor reached for a piece, his fingers trembling. What he didn't know was that Lila's past was about to crash into the present, and the truth would shake them all. Earlier that week, Lila had almost said no to the challenge. When Victor and his friends mocked her in the square, she'd wanted to walk away, to keep her quiet life untouched. But as she stood there, basket of carrots in hand, their laughter dug into her like thorns. It wasn't just about Chesed, it was about being seen as nothing, as less than nothing. She'd heard those laughs before, years ago, in the city. Back then, she was a girl who played chess with a smile, her grandfather cheering her on. But one day, a powerful player who hated losing, had accused her of cheating after she beat him. He was loud, cruel, and the crowd believed him. They turned on her, calling her a liar, a trickster. Her grandfather tried to defend her, but the stress broke him. He fell ill that night and never recovered. Lila left the city soon after, her heart shattered, vowing never to touch a chessboard again. She came to Willowbrook to disappear, to be the simple woman no one would notice. But now, sitting across from Victor, she felt that old fire stirring. This wasn't just a game mate, it was her chance to take something back. In the square, Victor moved a pawn, a weak attempt to save his queen. The crowd murmured, sensing his mistake. Lila's eyes flicked up to meet his, and for a moment, Victor saw something in her gaze, something fierce, like a wolf hiding in a lamb's skin. She moved her knight next, a move so sharp it made the crowd gasp again. Victor's queen was gone. The board was hers now, and everyone knew it. Tom pushed forward, his face red with anger. "This is a trick. She's no chess player. She's just a farmer," he yelled. The crowd shifted, unsure. Some nodded, still doubting Lila. Others stared at her, wondering if they'd misjudged her all along. Victor, his voice low, muttered, "Where did you learn to play like this?" Lila didn't answer. Instead, she leaned back, her hands still, as if the game was already won. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers growing louder. Then a voice from the back shouted, "Let her finish him." The square erupted in cheers, but not for Victor, for Lila. The tide had turned, and Victor's face twisted with fear. He made another move, desperate now, but Lila was already 3 steps ahead. Her next move would end it Aller, so everyone thought. But then, something unexpected happened. Something that made the crowd freeze, and Victor's eyes widened in shock. The square was a storm of gasps and whispers. Lila's hand paused over the board, her fingers hovering above a rook. Victor's eyes were wide, his breath shallow, as he braced for her next move. But instead of moving, Lila leaned back, her face unreadable, and said something that made the crowd fall silent. "I don't want to finish this game." The words hit like a thunderclap. Victor blinked, confused, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. The crowd erupted in murmurs. What's she doing? Is she giving up? Tom seized the moment, pointing at her. "See, she knows she can't win. She's scared." But Lila's calm gaze silenced him. She stood, her voice steady but soft. I'm not scared. I just don't need to prove anything to you. The crowd stared, baffled. Why would she stop now when she had Victor cornered? Then an old man pushed through the crowd, his face weathered and his eyes wide with recognition. Lila? He whispered, his voice trembling. Lila Starling? The name sent a ripple through the square. No one in Willowbrook knew that name, but the old man did. Earlier that day, Lila had almost thrown the game. As she sat across from Victor, memories of her grandfather's death flooded back. Each move she made felt like reopening an old wound. She'd wanted to walk away, to keep her past buried. But every laugh from the crowd, every sneer from Tom, reminded her of the city, of the man who'd ruined her love for chess. She played not for pride, but to silence that old pain. Now, with Victor's queen gone and the board in her control, she could end it. But as she looked at Victor's pale face, she saw something new: fear, not arrogance. It wasn't what she expected. For the first time, she wondered if winning was worth it. The old man, now at the front of the crowd, clutched a worn chess piece in his hand at King, scratched and faded. You're her, aren't you? He said louder now. The girl from the city, the one who beat the masters. The crowd turned to him, then back to Lila, their whispers growing frantic. Lila's heart skipped. She hadn't heard that name Lila Starling in years. She'd left it behind when she fled to Willowbrook, changing her name to Hyde. How did this man know? Victor, still reeling, looked between Lila and the old man, his voice shaky. What's he talking about? Who are you? Lila didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the old man, and a memory flashed. A kind face in the city market, a man who'd watched her play as a child, cheering her on. Was it him? The crowd pressed closer, their questions louder. Is it true? Was she a champion? Tom, red-faced, shouted. She's a liar. This is all a trick. But the old man held up the chess piece, his voice firm. I saw her play. She was unbeatable, and you mocked her. The square went quiet. Lila's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of her past crashing into the present. She looked at the board, then at Victor, who was staring at her like she was a stranger. She could end the game now, crush him in 2 moves. But the old man's words echoed in her mind, and she realized something bigger was at stake. She reached for the board, her fingers brushing a piece, and the crowd held its breath. What she did next would change everything forever.